If we don't drastically change our consumption patterns, we're in for a lot of trouble. Farming must adapt or risk killing the earth, says Big Agriculture. The rate of change to sustainable practices is too slow, according to a report funded by some of the biggest food and farming companies. So what needs to change? Is there enough food on the planet to feed us all? And for how long? Let's find out. Starting with the risk associated with current farming practices. According to the sponsors of a report by some of the biggest food and farming firms, governments and food industries must work together right away to improve global agriculture methods or risk killing the earth. Days before the start of the United Nations COP27 climate meeting in Egypt, the report from a task force inside the Sustainable Markets Initiative, a network of the international CEOs focused on climate concerns and founded by King Charles III, is being made public. In recent years, several of the biggest food and agriculture companies in the world have pushed for the use of sustainable agriculture methods. 15% of croplands are currently used for regenerative farming methods, which put reducing greenhouse gas emissions, soil health, and water conservation first. The report argues that the rate of change has been far too slow and must quadruple by 2030 for the globe to have any chance of keeping temperature rises under 1.5 Celsius, a threshold that, according to scientists, if crossed, will cause even more catastrophic climate change. Scary times, to say the least. Now, is this even being taken seriously? Giants like Bayer, Mars, McCain Foods, McDonald's, Mondelez, Olam, PepsiCo, Waitrose, and other companies have all signed the report. They represent a strong business and political force that has an impact on the global food supply chain. But then there are also among those most accountable for climate mismanagement, as we've seen in reports. Critics referred to the study as smoke and mirrors and said it's unlikely to address the true situation. 1/3 of greenhouse gases that humans release come from food production, and some of the signatories have been charged with greenwashing and environmental wrongdoing. In fact, this year, activist Greta Thunberg is abstaining from COP after labeling the World Summit a PR gimmick for politicians and individuals in authority to get attention. Yikes! It's now clearer than ever before how human and planetary health are related. Agriculture and large food corporations must both play a significant role in changing that. Sure, it won't be simple, but we must find a way to make it work. The largest industry in the world is agriculture. Around 50% of the planet's livable land is used for pasture and farmland, and 70% of the freshwater resources are consumed by these areas. The plea for reform comes as the food and agriculture industry, which employs 1 billion people, faces supply chain concerns in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic and skyrocketing inflation. The climate crisis is posing challenges to businesses throughout the world, and it doesn't help that all this is building mistrust and skepticism around companies who have directly impacted climate change. Next up, we simply cannot continue this way. This report contends that the urgency of reform shouldn't be diminished by current problems. It'd be easy to turn our attention on the longer-term issue of scaling regenerative farming given the inflationary environment and extensive supply chain disruption. But no, it's critical that we keep a sense of urgency and act now to prevent future catastrophes that are more severe. According to Sunny George Verghese, chief executive of Olam, one of the leading producers of cocoa beans, coffee, cotton, and rice in the world, we simply cannot continue to produce and consume food in the way we are doing it right now unless we don't mind killing the earth. We must figure out how to make the transition to a more resilient food system so that we can satisfy the requirements of a growing population without using as many resources as we do now. Moving on, what needs to be done? 3 food crops, potatoes, rice, and wheat, were researched for the paper, which also includes policy suggestions that will be presented at COP27. For now, members of the task force are seeking to increase farmers' interest in the short-term economic argument for change. Naturally, for the typical farmer, it simply isn't appealing enough. Governments must exert greater effort to close the knowledge gap and guarantee that farmers are employing best practices. Also, all stakeholders in the agriculture sector, including farmers, food producers, the government, banks, and insurers, must unite to support promoting a change to more sustainable methods. All the stakeholders, including the government, private businesses, publicly traded corporations, and individuals, need to bring about the change. Nobody can do this on their own. The group will evaluate how to disseminate the task force's work over the next 6 months, with the goals of creating a credible system of payments for farmers for environmental outcomes, lowering the cost of farmers transitioning to sustainable practices, ensuring government policy rewards farmers for going green, and encouraging the sourcing of crops from specific areas converting to sustainable practices. Coming up, is there enough food for the future? Guess what? In less than 40 years, there will be over 9 billion people on Earth. This assessment brings to light a serious problem for the world food system. them. For the roughly 7 billion people who are living today, there's enough food, yet almost a billion of them are hungry or malnourished, primarily because of poverty and unfair distribution. Our best estimates indicate that food production would need to expand between 60 and 100% in order to feed those who are currently hungry, as well as the additional 2 billion or so people who will inhabit the Earth by 2050. And if it stays business as usual for the farming industry, that means double, triple the demand for agricultural output. Why would the total demand double if population growth is less than a third? More people with more money, to put it simply. We'd have to consider a number of solutions that concentrate on reducing demand for food, such as modifying our diets and minimizing food loss and waste, as solving the problem through production alone won't be enough. A further 3 to 4 billion people now living on Earth who are increasingly wealthier will join this population, especially in India and China. Historically, wealthy nations in North America and Europe have fueled the demand for increased grain output. Richer foods such as meat and dairy are typically preferred by wealthier people. So around 2/3 of the rising crop calorie demand will most likely be caused by the rich. Next up, we'll tell you why boosting production isn't the answer. Let's do some quick math. Crop yields must improve annually by about 2.4% of 2007 yields in order to quadruple the world's food supply by 2050. We're already consuming nearly all the land that's suitable for agriculture, so further expansion of agriculture is a poor option to addressing future demands. Increased production, whether through higher yields or more frequent harvest, will be necessary, but it won't be enough. Growing more crops will help, at least in part, but enhancing global food security and our diets will also be important in order to satisfy the world's demands by the middle of the century. This is simply not a sustainable strategy for us to double food production. It'd threaten ecosystems, endanger many animal species, increase greenhouse gas levels, and contaminate our rivers. Another problem is that some of the yields for many of our most important crops are plateauing. 2/3 of the calories we obtain from agriculture are provided by only 4 crops: maize, rice, wheat, and soybeans. And guess what? The yields of these crops aren't increasing in a lot of places around the world. This stagnation is being caused by a variety of political and environmental factors. Crops are restricted in southern Africa, Eastern Europe, and much of Asia due to a lack of irrigation, water, or fertilizer. Socioeconomic issues are the main determinant in Africa. Factors including heat stress, soaring nighttime temperatures, depleted soils, erosion, disease contribute to a lack of yield growth in Asia and Australia. Now what? Finally, let's look at possible solutions. So the question is, how will we bridge and supply the demand gap for food in the future? Even in regions with similar growth circumstances, yields around the world exhibit significant diversity, according to experts. By enhancing crop nutrient and water supply, we could increase yields on underutilized lands. The fundamental calorie requirements of around 2.8 billion people might be satisfied by assisting farmers in increasing yields to within 75% of yields reached by top-performing farmers under similar growing conditions. We need to address issues with distribution, access to suitable seed varieties, and market infrastructure in many regions of the world. Utilizing the crops we already farm more effectively is another option to close the gap. Global food demand can be increased by altering our diets to rely on fatty foods, particularly meat, and by reducing food waste. These small changes could have significant effects if completely embraced. We'll need to implement a range of cutting-edge tactics if we want to successfully bridge the gap in the future. We need to cultivate more crops while using the food we already harvest more effectively. And it all starts from changing the way we go about farming. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think big corporations and the agriculture industry will be able to tackle the climate crisis by changing their ways? Let us know in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.